Welcome, everybody, to Shadoe at Night. This is Monday, August the 11th, 2025. You know the biggest complaint that I get from people every single day, almost without fail? It's, Shadoe, I never get notifications for your show. And so the first question I have to ask is, are you following the show on any one of the platforms? Yes, of course I am. I follow you on Facebook. I follow you on YouTube. Have you got notifications turned on? Usually, it takes about 5 minutes for that response to come back. And when they come back, it's very sheepish. I guess I did that. Now, sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes Facebook and YouTube and other platforms will just shut off your notifications without telling you. I don't know how it happens, but it does. So make sure if you want to get notifications for this show, and it shouldn't be too hard to find because it's live every weeknight, starting in September. Up until now, or up until then, it will be Monday to Thursday at 8 o'clock Central. And then after Labor Day, we go back to our 5-day-a-week schedule, Monday to Friday, 8 o'clock Central. So those are 3 surefire ways that you can find this show when it's live. And if you don't, you can always watch a replay. Great guest tonight with all of the crazy stuff going on in Nova Scotia. Who better to talk to than a 29-year firefighting veteran from that province, Peter MacIsaac, also the author of The Redneck Conservative, is going to join the show tonight as well. Oh, by the way, this is what happens apparently. Let me see if I can find this here real fast because, yeah, here we go. This is what happens if you go into the woods in Nova Scotia. Apparently, you gain the powers of a dragon. Hello, Tony, watching on X in Calgary. Vicky is watching in Nova Scotia tonight on Facebook. Hello, Linda in Trenton. Kathy is watching in Fox Warren, Manitoba. Patricia, Grimsby, Ontario. Lucette in Saint Jean Baptiste. Hello, Regine. Stephanie, Joy, Wanda, Barb, Fiona, Susan, Vicky, Shelley, Corey in Ontario. Hello, Kathy. Ellen is watching tonight. Giselle Ray is watching on YouTube. Hello, Lisa. Watching where? In South Carolina. South Carolina, the tulips in bloom down there. Beulah is watching in Alberta. Hello, Sue in Windsor. Eddie is watching in Stonewall. Frank, Wanda, Carla, Regina, Mo, Sandra, Christine. Wherever you're watching tonight, guys, and whatever platform you happen to be watching on, don't forget to like and share. Share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. Peter MacIsaac joins the show in 30 seconds. Hello, Peter. Welcome back to the show. It's good to have you.
Well, I just like the sound of that voice, buddy. I show up just to hear you talk, Shadoe, to tell you the truth. But thanks for the invite.
You're welcome. Did you see the fire-breathing video?
I've been stuck on my phone. I'm getting bleary-eyed here from there's a lot of humor out there, but down here in Nova Scotia, it's really not that funny a situation, buddy.
I guess.
Don't get me wrong. You either going to laugh or cry. Take your pick.
So you are a 29-year veteran fighting fires in Nova Scotia. You're with Conservation Nova Scotia. You put together a task force of retired firefighting conservation officers only to be turned away by the province just a couple of years ago. That was your rise to notoriety. You've written a book. It's called The Redneck Conservative. There's nobody better to ask than you what the hell is going on out there right now.
Well, you can ask, but if you're waiting for an official response from the government, all you're going to hear is a little bit of this, a little bit of that, smattering of truth, but probably 90% BS. Here's what we're confronted with down here right now, Shadoe. We have oppressive freedom-stripping policies that have been put in place by a premier who has completely ignored the Fire Weather Index, which is the system that's been used all across North America since 1970 to determine what fire conditions are, and then based on that data they can determine whether or not fire bans or travel bans should be initiated. And for political reasons and for his own, apparently right now it's looking like PTSD, and I'm no doctor, by the way, associated with what he went through in 2023, the premier has told his MLAs and told the public that he has difficulty sleeping at night and is having problems sleeping because he sat with families who are worried about charred bodies and burned down homes, and he's having real issues with it. And as a result of that, he overrode the system that we've had in place over my entire career that worked and worked well, and imposed some of the most draconian measures that actually, not some of the most draconian measures that have been put in place anywhere in North America, including every state in the U.S. and every province in Canada, I believe in history.
Peter, it used to be when fire season was high, you would drive past a sign of Smokey the Bear in whatever park you were going into, and you would see that scale or that meter, right? Red, green, yellow, medium, low, high, the fire risk. Is the fire risk, according to what you've observed in Nova Scotia right now, incredibly high? Is it just
Actually, as of today, Shadoe, it's probably the worst it's been. But I can tell you this, when the fire ban was first put in place back, I think it was on July 30th, he announced that it would go in place on the 31st. On the 31st, 40% of the province would have been down in that yellow and green zone, which is what we called low and intermediate, which
Right.
would allow you to burn legally at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And he put a fire ban in place. And on just on the surface, that fire ban on its own ignored the fire weather index system that we rely on every day from a professional status to make determinations of where you can and can't burn and what the conditions are. And for whatever reason, the premier completely sidestepped that data and overstepped. I guess we're referring to it as government overreach. And what he did was a straight up charter violation. So I consulted a legal team on how best to deal with it. And then shortly afterwards, he decided he was going to put in a full blanket shore to shore, north to south travel ban in place. And in that single decision, Shadoe, I mean, there's a bunch of points that I want to bring up tonight, but over in that one moment, he did more to destroy Nova Scotia's tourism industry than any premier has done in the history of the province by that one decision.
What's the reaction been in the province? Are people laughing along? Are they terribly concerned about government overreach? Are they defending this guy?
So anybody that's familiar with the Milgram experiment, and you probably know what that was.
I know what that is, but if you could maybe briefly describe it for people that don't.
So the Milgram experiment has proven that 80% of the population cannot not take orders from a person of authority. So no matter what the orders are, they'll follow them. So what they did is they had an experiment where they put people in a separate room from people that were brought in off the street and said, look, we want you to participate in some science that we're doing. And they had a guy in a white jacket and, you know, a lab coat and a clipboard. And then they put him down in front of electric controls and said the people in the other room were testing how much they can take in electrical shocks. And they've done some nasty things. So we're going to crank up the shocks on them here. And we want you to ignore what you hear and just follow my orders directly. So they started cranking up the power, and the people in the other room were actors. They were paid to do what they were being told to do.
The guy in the lab coat was too, wasn't he?
And the guy in the lab coat, well, yeah, this was all orchestrated. And the only people who didn't know what were going on were the people that come in off the street and said, look, we want you to help us with this scientific experiment.
Yep.
And so as they turned up the crank, the people in the other room were screaming and begging for mercy and please don't shock me anymore. And the people would look at the guy in the lab coat and say, are you sure this is okay? And the guy in the lab said, oh, no, that there's no issues here, just going up. Until the dial got to the point it said lethal. And 80% of the people in that experiment were willing to turn that dial all the way up to lethal because a man in a white lab coat holding a clipboard and appeared to be the voice of authority was telling them it was okay to do it. And that's called a Milgram experiment. And so that's what the numbers are showing us down here in Nova Scotia, because I've been monitoring stuff here for the last few days. I can't stay off of Shadoe. So we're probably got about 20% of the population that realizes, like I said, that this will go back to this term, oppressive freedom stripping policies. But the other 80%, the old tactic that actually, I don't want to go back 100 years, but I'm going to have to. The Nazis actually perfected it. And Hermann Goering, in the Nuremberg trials, when he was asked, how are you able to control this many intelligent people to do things that didn't make sense? And he said, it's simple. If you can make people afraid and instill fear in them, you can get them to do anything. So on talk show radio down here, and all the comments that I'm seeing on Facebook and X, is that about 80% of Nova Scotians are in a state of absolute fear. We've got people down here, Shadoe, living in the center of Halifax, saying they're worried about their home burning down.
In the middle of the city.
Yeah, so it's at that level. So common sense common sense and Elvis have left the building, and people are afraid. And when people are afraid, the premier proved during COVID what was possible, and he knew what he would be able to get away with, and that's why he's been able to do this. But one good thing happened. A buddy of mine down in Sydney, Jeff Eively, a retired military guy, he gave me a call. He said, Pete, I want to get a ticket. What's the best way to go about doing it? So I said, Jeff, call DNR, get a hold of the game warden boys and tell them what you're going to do. So he went up to the office, talked to them, told them what he wanted to do, walked into the woods, I think 13 steps in and 13 steps out, and they gave him a ticket for $28,872.50 for walking 13 feet into the woods, into the day, no fire hazard, none of any kind. But the issue was Jeff wanted a court case where he would have standing, and now he's got a group of lawyers behind him, and they're going to this trip around. Tim Houston's not getting away with just straight out, do what I tell you, or we're going to crush you.
Now the ticket was $28,875, as you say, and his video verifies that. But where does the extra $3,875 come from? I thought these tickets were for $25,000. Are these taxes or something?
Yeah, it's $25,000, and then there's, I think, what's called a victim impact fee, and then court costs and a couple of things. So it was, I'll give you an example down here right now, Shadoe. If you get caught drunk driving, I think your maximum fine's $5,000. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. So you have to look at things. I look at things through the eye of the charter, because I'm involved in a charter violation case with Premier Houston, because in last November's snap election, he strategically kept 19 independents off the ballot. So I've learned an awful lot about how things work in that side of things in the court system. But I've also learned that Premier Houston doesn't give a rat's ass about what happens inside the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Peter, you know this guy. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You know this guy. You helped get him elected a few years ago, and this is not something you're too proud of today, but he did say he was a conservative back then. I mean, how well do you know him? What is this guy made up of?
So back in the day, I've had him and his son out fishing, and I've been out fishing with him as well, and you learn a lot about people when they're fishing. So Tim Houston was initially, he's a chartered accountant who was involved in the Paradise Papers for, I think it was at least 10 years down in the Caribbean. And 8 of those years, you can't find any data on him. But for 2 of those years, he was on a multiple boards of different companies. And his specialty was making sure that you paid as little tax as possible in your businesses that were registered down in the Bahamas. Then when he came up to Nova Scotia, he came out of nowhere, basically, and got involved with the Masons. And from there, he found his way into politics and didn't really know what party that he thought he should be involved with. And the Liberals really didn't want him, and the NDP didn't want him. And he said, well, maybe I'm enough of a conservative that conservatives would like me. And there was a vacuum at the time. Not so much of a vacuum, but there was a vacuum that he helped create. Tim is a student of Machiavelli. I mean, he's definitely read Machiavellian's The Prince. The man's ruthless. And every MLA or anybody that stands up to him since he's been elected goes directly under the bus, career over. That's why there hasn't been any pushback from any MLA on anything he's done since he's been elected. And since he's been elected, he's canceled set election dates. He's limited down to next to nothing the time that legislation can be debated. He's tried to reduce access to freedom of information requests on the province.
Yeah. And
he basically is running roughshod and doing exactly what he wants because he literally has nobody to stand up against him. And I was involved in a project to try to do something about it. But I helped get Tim elected, and I got snookered like hundreds of us did. We really believed he was a conservative and that this guy, because he'd tell you one thing, and I could tell you emphatically, he turned around and turned full on. Actually, he's more liberal than a liberal. And then he's got a smattering of Marxism in there and a lot of socialism wrapped up in the way he thinks. But when he was involved in the Paradise Papers, all indications are he was heavily involved with State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock. And I don't know who's handling him today, but some of the things that are being done here in Nova Scotia don't add up. Like China right now is our second largest trading partner. When China put a major tariff on our lobster fishing industry, he never opened his mouth. That tariff's still in place. You'll never hear him say anything about it. So all of a sudden, when this happened with the fires, back in 2023, when we had our largest forest fire in the province's history, that was caused by arson. And in 2012, Nova Scotia got rid of our helitack teams. Now, anybody from Western Canada knows what helitack is, because those are teams of the best firefighters that when an emergency fire is called in, those are the guys that they lean on heavily. They're the first line of defense. They're the guys that could go into remote areas and start fire suppression efforts and start water bombing before land crews normally arrive. Those are the guys that keep fires at 3 acres instead of turning into 30,000 acres.
Right.
And in 2012, we had a new manager put in over at our fire control center who had no fire experience whatsoever. And he got in a real authority match with the guys on the crews because he wanted them working through the day, painting buildings, mowing lawns, this type of thing. And because he had no fire experience, he didn't understand that these guys' job was to stay in shape, be prepared, and be ready to go at the drop of a hat, moment's notice, to not be exhausted. So in 2012, we lost our only helitack team. And then a couple of other things happened down here, Shadoe, and this all builds up to this. And this is the backstory that you'll never hear in the news. So what happened is the new manager, after he managed to fire that specialized team, then he moved to get rid of our you guys would call it a medium helicopter out west. And it was a Bell 212. And that was the only helicopter we had capable of moving a 5-man crew with all the equipment. And we lost that. And that was Nova Scotia's insurance policy against major forest fires. Over my career, I probably seen even on my own shifts, I probably saw those guys save the day at least 14 times, where they kept fires to a point that they were manageable, and ground crews arrived and saved those 3, 4, 5 acres fires from turning into 30,000 acre fires. So we lost that. And then what happened? Another decision happened, because we used to have a really efficient fire tower system, the old Smokey the Bear towers that you would see in a park. And these guys were the hardest guys in the world to find, because these are different ducks. These are guys that'll go sit there from the 1st of April right to the middle of October looking for smoke. So we had some of the best here in Nova Scotia. And a decision was made after the helitack team was dismantled to tear down all of those fire towers. And the reason that they gave, and I'll circle back here in a second, was that with the advent of everybody having cell phones, there was no need to maintain that system and maintain those structures anymore and keep those people on, because the province could rely on people with cell phones calling in when they saw fires. Now, the problem was, even if they called in, there was no helitack team to go out for first response. We were starting to rely on volunteer fire departments, and we would supply those guys with the gear they needed, with a major forestry pump system set up to all these volunteer fire departments, but those guys couldn't get there on time either. So, and then on top of that, we used to have a fire permit system in Nova Scotia, where if you wanted to burn, you had to come in, talk to a guy like me, and you had to pay your money, and then we'd write down the terms and conditions for you to be able to burn, and all that we would refer back to the fire weather index that day, the one that Tim Houston completely ignored when he put in these bans. And so 50% of the time, Shadoe, we would talk people out of burning. I'd say, look, rather than burn now, why don't you wait till it rains? Cover up what you want to burn. When it starts raining, we'll give you a call and you can light things up. Or why don't you wait till the end of fire season when there's no risk? Because in Nova Scotia, if you set a forest fire, you can be held 100% financially responsible for the damage. So a $30,000 fire, you get a bill, and they go after you in court, and you got to pay it. So what happened was those three things happened, and I want to really point out to people that maybe think here in Nova Scotia that we still have a fire tower system. We have nothing. We do not have people in Nova Scotia's forest today with cell phones to call in the event that there was a dry lightning strike, or that a piece of broken glass in the ditch starts a fire. There's nobody in the woods right now to call in those fires, because even if you get a permit to work in the woods right now, one of the conditions on the permit is you're not allowed to have a cell phone in your possession or wear a smartwatch. You can't make this stuff up. I'm looking at you're looking incredulous, but so am I, because I'm a professional at this, and I'm the last guy in Nova Scotia that wants to see a forest fire.
Why are they not allowed to have cell phones or smartwatches?
Well, apparently someone told a politician that those can start a fire. So I went back through all the stats, Shadoe. And people need to understand this. In Nova Scotia, there's no records of anyone ever dying in a forest fire. We have more people in Nova Scotia killed by coyotes than we have killed in forest fires. Now, the big fires we had in 2023 cost $189 million in damage. They were major. There was 2 major fires, and both of them were started illegally, right? And the conditions were nowhere near what they are now. But you can't legislate against stupidity, and people did some dumb stuff. And even the biggest fire we had, that was called I forget the name of the fire now, but I refer to it as the Shelburne fire. If we had a Helitack crew in place at the time, the chance of that fire burning 60,000 acres was slim to none. Those guys, I've reviewed all the data. I looked at everything. If those are the guys who would have been in there, they'd have done an initial attack. We'd start dropping with our biggest helicopter. And even here's another piece of information I want people to know. After the disaster, that could be pinned on the federal government that happened in Jasper, they loosened up some money, and they said to the provinces, "We'll help you guys with some new aircraft for battling fires." Well, in 2016, after we lost our biggest helicopter with the most water dropping capacity, we bought 4 helicopters, none of them that had those same capacities, and none of them were capable of handling a Helitack crew. So to be clear what Helitack is, again, it's the province's fire insurance policy that I don't care if those guys sit there all summer and don't get used. The year when you need them, you need them. It's like having fire insurance for 10 years and saying my house hasn't burned down yet. I think I'll cancel my policy.
You mentioned that the fires a couple of years ago wound up costing $189 million total.
Yep.
What would it cost to, I guess, start again, because you'd have to start a whole new crew, a Helitack squad, and get the necessary equipment, including the helicopter?
Less than $2 million. And I'll give you an example, Shadoe. In order to win the last election, the Premier canceled bridge tolls on the 2 bridges from Dartmouth to Halifax, and they have a maintenance budget of around $40 million a year that we were taking in, and that was offset by tolls. And he canceled the tolls to help get himself elected, and now that's spread out to the taxpayer. And that $40 million got to come from somewheres, and that same amount of money should have went back into Helitack, and it should have went back into maintaining the forest fire tower things. Here's what happens with forest fire towers and the guys that sit in them. They would call us in, Shadoe. Even if you fired up a barbecue and it made too much smoke, they would spot it. And they'd watch it for a minute, maybe 2. And then if it went back down, they'd notify you right away. I just picked up smoke at these bearings. And then they'd get a cross-reference from another tower. So you had a pinpoint location. And
that would happen within minutes, or even
that would happen within a minute. The second they saw it, they would notify district staff, and district staff would call Shadoe and say, "Look, and Shadoe, our fire control would be monitoring conversations all around the province, so they would know this would be happening." And then what would happen is, if it turned out the smoke was growing, if it was in any remote area at all, immediately it would be up to the technical staff in the district to call in the Helitack crew, knowing from where it was. Let's say we're looking at 45 minutes to an hour to get a ground crew there. We can have Helitack on site within 20 minutes. And what the helicopter would do would drop. Those guys would set up a full pump operation, and then immediately that helicopter would be off, dropping the most water that any helicopter that we had could drop. And
how much, just I'm sorry to interrupt you, how much water in one dump does a helicopter like that able to dump?
So it's not that much. It's 225 gallons. But it's pinpoint accurate. And these guys were high grade technicians. Some of the stuff I watched these guys do was amazing. But a lot of times they were doing short hops. They might only be flying 2 kilometers to a nearby water source. So they were back and forth and back and forth. And by the time the ground crews got there, they may have already done 20 to 30 water drops. And we may have the whole fire circled, which is the overall goal with when you're fighting forest fire.
Right.
And so without these guys, that 3-acre fire, by the time the ground crews got there, it could be 30. And then the helicopters that were available, the smaller helicopters that the province had, were dropping 90 to, I think, 110 gallons based on how much fuel they had on board. So they were about half the drop capacity. So when the federal government sprung money loose to buy new helicopters and upgrade them, the province went and got 4 more of the exact same helicopters they had in 2016. And none of them still have a capacity to carry a Helitack crew and drop that amount of water. It's like the people running the province are completely tone deaf. So what happened, as you brought up earlier, as all those homes were burning down in 2023, and I could see why the Premier has an issue with it, because he's partway responsible because they dropped the ball. I put together a team of experts, and we offered our services to the province for 5 days in a row, and the province turned us down every day. And, I think between it was 5 or 6 of us, might have been 6 of us, we had over 200 years experience. fighting forest fires. And we could have gone in all these positions, and we offered long-term services. And every day the Premier and the Minister of Natural Resources said, no, we don't want you. And then they brought in people from South Africa and the US and out west. And what people don't understand, Shadoe, is the provinces right now, that there's an organization called CIFSI. It's Canadian Fire. I forget what they stand for, but those are the guys who control where equipment goes when you're in an emergency and need to call in aircraft from other provinces. Well, right now we can't call in any gear from New Brunswick because they have their own problems. Guys out west have their own problems. And what happened is fire budgets all across Canada, beginning around 2010, began getting cut back. At the same time, the government was screaming climate change, climate change. So instead of ramping up forest fire fighting initiatives, they cut them all back.
This sounds like a setup, Peter. This sounds like it. I mean, how on earth could, I mean, you said tone deaf a few seconds ago, and I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So I mean, tone deaf is one thing, but you know, when you cut back on the very services that you need, and you're screaming climate change, like you say, and all of that. By the way, how many arsonists have been caught setting these fires across the country the last few years? It seems that number is going up as well. I know Manitoba's got a couple, and Alberta had a few of them a couple of years ago.
Hey, look, just in your own province of Saskatchewan, they had a firefighter who's just convicted of lighting 30 fires. Instead of getting a couple of years in jail, I think they gave him 18 months probation and 200 hours worth of community service. And
he's not allowed near any matches.
Yeah, and so what ends up happening is, okay, so, and just to, I want to highlight the absurdity of what's happening in Nova Scotia. The Premier's already said, even if we get a rain, they're not lifting it until we get a lot of rain, right? But with the fire weather index system, if it rains tonight in your area, any ban can be lifted tomorrow because the fine fuel moisture content goes back down to zero with any amount of rain, which means you're allowed to go back to normal things that you would normally do for at least a day or two. And if it dries up, we'll shut you down again. So the blanket thing that he put in place for people got to realize this is for 10 weeks. This is the rest of our entire tourist season here in Nova Scotia. Gone. Fishing season, hunting seasons, all kinds of different stuff has just been wiped out, right? I don't know what the total cost is going to be, but it's absolutely devastating to the province. But the people who are afraid, Shadoe, are afraid. And I can't make them unafraid. I'll give you an example. Today in Nova Scotia, we had a heat warning. And the heat warning was for 83 degrees Fahrenheit for anybody in the U.S. listening to this. So 28 degrees, I think it was 27 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe 27 degrees Fahrenheit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 82.3 or 82.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
I remember in my old radio days, 28 was 82. So 29, maybe.
Yeah. So here we are. And the whole weather map for Nova Scotia, when you watch the weather on the news, everything's red. There's flashing warnings on my phone here all day. Heat wave. People in the U.S. think we're insane. If you come down here and you go, when I was a kid growing up on Cape Breton Island, we didn't go to the beach till it was 85 degrees. Anything colder than that's just too cold for the beach, man.
Yeah.
And now it's weather warnings. And, the federal government's Mark Carney's throwing $14 million now into an education program, the federal education program to teach little kids that climate change is an existential threat to their life. So I can't blame everything that's going on here in Nova Scotia on just incompetence. I would like to.
It needs to be more than that.
Yeah. So what happened? So the other thing I did too, Shadoe, as part of my job, I was a game warden too. And I was a decent investigator. And investigators look at circumstantial evidence. And then you have to take a compilation of all the circumstantial evidence and say, well, where's it pointing? Because one other thing I didn't mention was we used to have 5-man fire crews in every district, and the province cut them back to 3. So they cut them back to 3. They got rid of the helitag team. They stopped giving out the full fire pump assemblies to fire. I've talked to fire guys today. They said they give us hose pump, but they didn't give us a fire pump. And they said, well, how are you supposed to set up a fire pump operation without the pump? He said, we asked that too. I was blown away. District offices have been shut down where they don't have people there to take calls. And without a fire tower system right now, Nova Scotia is unmonitored right now. And we have some pretty serious weather conditions. And we're starting to get what's called a DC code or a your DUF code. is actually not DEFCO, DC, but whatever it is, it's I forget now. It's a measurement of the big logs laying on the ground, how dry they are, and they're starting to get dry. And there's a few places in the province where those readings are over 500. But I saw that all kinds of times back in the 80s and 90s, right? And even into the 2000s. And we never ever did this to the province. And if you did have a travel ban, it initially started with all forestry equipment. So all forestry equipment right now is allowed to operate in the province with permits. Now they have to operate in the evening. I think they have to be out of the woods at 8 o'clock in the morning. But it's still daylight down here at 6 in the morning. What if you and your wife wanted to take your dog for a walk? And we get a lot of fog down here and a lot of humidity. And we get a lot of water on the grass and that in the morning. So what if you wanted to take right now in Nova Scotia for you and your wife wanted to take your dog for a walk at 7 in the morning and back by 8, by the time the industrial guys are out of the woods? That's $58,000 in fines, man. And if it's raining, listen to this, Shadoe. If it's a light rain, you're still getting the ticket.
So to be clear, because somebody had said something on social media the other day, I went and looked at the story again, and this person was wrong. It's a complete and total ban on going against any woods, even if they're on your own property. Am I correct in saying that?
No, if it's on your own land, you're allowed to walk on your own land, but you can't. Let's say I came to your place. I can't walk on your land with you if it's forested. So your property rights just went out the window. So it doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. Someone brought this up to me today too. I was talking to a fireman from down the South Shore in Nova Scotia. He said, what about electric vehicles? He said, you do know if they're on a back road anywhere. And he said, one of them catches fire. We don't have the equipment to put them out. They're going to burn for 2 days before they're burned down into the ground.
Because of those.
And, is there a ban on electric vehicles right now? No. Is there a ban on golf courses? No. Is there a ban on, there's a bunch of things that there aren't bans on, and you can get a permit. But imagine not being allowed to carry a cell phone when the government relied on cell phone users in remote areas to call in fires when they get rid of the tower system.
Wait. So, you talked earlier about people being afraid, and this was the greatest tool for being able to manipulate the masses, make them afraid. So the people in Nova Scotia are afraid that they think their house in the middle of Halifax is going to burn down. This is going to be a sad question, or maybe a sad answer, but I mean, don't these people recognize the pattern that is being executed by the government of Nova Scotia right now is almost the exact same pattern they executed during COVID? When they say that it's non-essential for anybody to, they didn't use the expression non-essential, but they said, well, things that, walking in the woods, things that many of us, most of us never do anyway, right? So he made it seem like you're not going to be affected by this.
Yeah, so it's not almost, Shadoe. It's exactly the same. I'll give you an example. Fishing's not essential, but playing golf is.
Well, that's what I was about to ask. So, I mean, you on a golf course, if you hit your ball into the woods, can you go look for it?
You can. It'll cost you $28,873.50.
But
if you got a buddy helping you, then he gets a ticket too.
But some of these golf courses are in the woods.
I called 2 days ago. I called fire control, their headquarters, and asked that exact question. I said, are golf courses being shut down? And they said, it's up to the golf course. I said, well, what about the ones in the woods? He said, those are good questions. That's a good question I can't answer. And I said, well, what about our Indigenous population? Does this affect them? And he went, no. Okay. He said, well, on federal lands, but when they're not on federal lands, I'm not sure. And I don't know who to refer you to. And I said, okay, so our Indigenous population, this doesn't apply to them. It doesn't apply to golfers. And then I said, and it doesn't apply to people with industrial operations in the woods, and they have permits. And then it doesn't apply to anybody who apparently is connected. They're allowed to do what they want to do, and they can get permits. But for the average guy who wants to take his dog for a walk in the woods right now, you're not allowed to. And they're going to be ruthless of it. Tim Houston come on, and he said there's going to be no exceptions. So the other question I asked him, Shadoe, they said, well, okay, we're getting a lot of questions. If you have a path that goes to down to the ocean or to a beach, for example, if it's just a short walk, you can go there. So I said, look, I need a definition for legal reasons. I said, what's the definition of a short walk? To one person, it's 10 feet, another person, it's a kilometer. Well, that's a good question too, and we don't have a definition of what's a short walk. Okay, so what you're saying is none of this was thought out. None of this has been thought through, other than every day get on the weather and say we're having a heat warning today. It's in the low 80s, high humidity. It's going, and here's the crazy thing: they'll get on and say, due to the humidity, it's going to feel like it's 92 degrees or 34. Well, high humidity drops fire weather indices. So
because
the higher the
humid.
humidity, the more humid it is, the less likelihood a fire is going to start. So what happens here is all of a sudden the whole climate agenda that said climate, the drier woods is called, and fires are caused by climate change. Now they're caused by someone scuffling their feet apparently on the gravel or driving a bicycle on an abandoned railroad track. So there's so many businesses that are going to get wiped out by this. You got to remember, this is their peak season. This is when people in Nova Scotia took their vacation the last couple of weeks in August, and the first, before back to school. And the people that are afraid are the ones, the squeaky wheels, and they're on talk show radio. I think that he did, and I mean, I get called everything under the sun for just giving them information. I said, here's the cold hard facts. I'm not trying to sway. I'm just giving you the cold hard facts. Like I say, we had one woman killed by coyotes and nobody killed by fires. And here's the issue: is last year, Shadoe, in Nova Scotia, we had 77 fatalities on the highway. This is a pretty slippery slope. If this is all designed for our safety, what's to stop the premier from on the long weekend saying, you know what, last long weekend we had 8 people killed. We're just for this year, just for a trial, everybody stays home this long weekend. There'll be no traveling. That way we know for sure no one's going to be killed on the highway.
Well, that's what we're expecting. Many people have couched this as the beginning or experiment in the climate lockdowns. I want to talk to you about those squeaky wheels, these people who feel as though they are going to be the police of society. We saw it happen during COVID when they were calling the snitch lines on their neighbors. My neighbor 2 doors down has got 6 people over. I know it's Thanksgiving, but you got to come and do something. Well, they're doing that very same thing in Nova Scotia. I hear that line is flooded with calls.
It's to the point if somebody tries to call in, you can't get through. When people are afraid, you can convince them to do anything. And that's a sad fact. And the premier's done a great job of it. And the press has gone in. I don't know where all the funding is coming from, but a lot of the press that survived in Nova Scotia still gets federal funding. And the federal government requires that you push a climate narrative. I mean, there's a bunch of things going on here. I don't mean to sound too conspiratorial, but as a former investigator, I just look at evidence, and the evidence keeps piling up that this is not just a straight a fire ban. Because if it was a straight fire ban, they would have looked at that FWI data, fire weather index data, and wouldn't have put it in when they did. Now, don't get me wrong. They may have considered it actually today, but there's been a couple of fires this August that didn't make it bigger than an acre. They were right beside the road and someone jumped on them right away. They didn't need a helitack crew, but I'll give you an example. In the Highlands of Nova Scotia, there's nobody up there today. And if that burns, that's a fire that'll burn a couple of 100,000 acres, and that'll burn from one end of the Cape Breton Island to the other. And what will happen up there, Shadoe, if there's nobody there to call in the smoke, and they don't have helitack, and they don't have those ground crews up there as quick as they need to be, they won't be able to contain it. And I watched that happen in my career in the 80s, and I watched it happen again in the 90s, and between, I retired in 2012. And that was just around, and I was one of them mouthy guys. Like I would, at a staff meeting, when they were coming up with this crazy nonsense stuff, I would question it. And the day I left, there was a bunch of people in management went, thank God McIsaac's gone. Now we can push forward any agenda that we want, and we're not going to be questioned. Right. And I'm not against some of the things that the government is trying to do. But the reality of is what I am against is lying, oppressive politicians that continually lie to me. And I know that Tim Houston, when him and I parted ways, I caught him lying to me to my face for the 3rd time. And I went, wow, we got ourselves a pathological lying psychopath who has no problem in looking me straight in the eye and lying to me. And after he did it the 3rd time, I went, okay, so this is not a one-off. This is not a mistake. You operate this way. And so that's what the premier's doing right now.
Do we have any conservatives left in this country? I mean, they may call themselves that, and they may run under that banner.
So when I wrote that book, The Redneck Conservative, How Conservatives Are Made, I still have a conservative mindset. But all the parties are wings of the same bird. I haven't heard any other. I haven't heard the federal Liberals say anything about this. I haven't heard the federal Conservatives saying anything about this climate lockdown. And don't kid yourself, this is North America's first major, for this length of time, climate lockdown. Joe Rogan's talking about it. And when Joe Rogan's talking about the lunacy in Nova Scotia, and every province in Nova Scotia is talking about this, I got a phone call yesterday from Germany, Shadoe, saying, is this really happening in Canada? Or are you kidding me? And when they found, I said, yeah, you and your wife, 58 grand for walking in the rain with a dog. It can happen.
Michelle Ferreri talked about it a bit. She's no longer an MP, obviously. She did a 2-minute video on Instagram or something. But I watched the comments on that video, Peter, and she was absolutely outraged that Tim Houston would ever think of doing such a thing, locking people out of the forest.
Yeah.
And then as the comments progressed, right, she backpedaled and she said, well, maybe it's just the way it's been communicated. I mean, it's terrible. And so people called her out on that, including myself. And they said, Michelle, your video states that a complete and total ban on being able to go into the woods in Nova Scotia is absolutely ridiculous. And you're calling on the premier to remove it. And then a few comments down the line, you're saying, well, maybe it was just the way it was communicated.
No, that's not the issue. The issue
is the waffling, right?
Well, it's not just the waffling, Shadoe. It's that, and COVID exposed this. We didn't have the real pandemic that Canada had was a pandemic of moral cowardice.
Yep. And
COVID showed you who you can rely on and who's going to crack when they're afraid. And literally everybody that was still driving around right now in their vehicle with a mask years later, they're on the phones and they're on talk radio right now saying, oh my God, you're so selfish and get your ego out of the way. And well,
do something for the community.
And
stop thinking about yourself.
Yeah. Have you ever been near a house when it needed to be evacuated and stuff? And yeah, I've been on 60,000 acre fires, man. I've seen walls of flame that are 300 to 400 feet high, buddy, that sound like a freight train coming at you. And so people don't understand that. And so a guy like me, there's not a single other person in the government of Nova Scotia speaking up about this, because every one of them will be crushed by Tim Houston if they do.
So I know you don't want to sound too conspiratorial. You said it. But you did say something to me. I'm bringing this up because you said you didn't want to before the show started. And then I said, you can't not. And again, you're an investigator.
Yeah.
You follow the evidence. Yep. There's nothing concrete. You follow the circumstantial evidence. What's in front of you, you look at. And you piece it together. You follow it to its natural conclusion. So what the hell's going on?
So Mark Carney wrote a book called Values. His entire raison d'etre, his reason for being, is to somehow get in a position of power, declare a climate emergency, and bring in net zero policies. And that's exactly what he's trying to do in the province. Now, Tim Houston's been at barbecues up in Ontario with Sean Chrétien and at Christy Freeland's house. And the two conservative premiers that were supposed to be there was Tim Houston and Doug Ford, right? And I saw a picture of it. So Tim is not a conservative. And I know he's had meetings already with Mark Carney. And so right now, Nova Scotia is trying to put in a massive windmill farm offshore. We want to be, according to Tim, we want to be the people that set the standard for the green initiative. Well, in order to have a green initiative and do what he wants to do, he's going to need tens of billions of dollars, and this province doesn't have them. They're going to need money, and they're going to need big federal money and investors like Brookfield Assets Management. And the person who holds the keys to Brookfield Assets Management is Mark Carney. And so all I'm looking at is circumstantial evidence, and I've sat down with other investigators that said the same thing, and have said to me, well, do you think that there's a possibility Tim Houston has got some kind of a side deal with Mark Carney to help push a climate agenda, because that pushes his agenda, and that justifies, since Tim Houston's done this, you got to remember New Brunswick's already done it, that they put in a travel ban here If it wasn't yesterday, it was today. So they have a woods travel ban now. And in Newfoundland, they have bans over there that if you break their fire legislation, you can get $50,000 up to $150,000 in fines and 6 months in jail. Now, Newfoundland's got a little more common sense because they had a ban on ATV travel, and then they got so much pushback because they need ATVs to get around over there. They said, look, as long as you have a spark arrestor, it's not a problem. But I can quantifiably tell the people of Nova Scotia there's never been a fire started by a smartwatch or a cell phone or someone simply walking in the woods or someone fishing. And there's legislation to penalize people for throwing a butt, any type of substance or anything that might start a fire. That legislation all exists. And then Tim Houston, people need to remember that the first $25,000 fine in Nova Scotia was implemented by Tim Houston during the truckers rally for people standing on the side of the highway with a sign that said freedom. And if you stood on the side of the highways in Nova Scotia on an overpass with a sign saying freedom, go truckers, he was going to hit you with a $25,000 fine, and he didn't get enough pushback because people were terrified. And then he also put a fire ban in after the 2023 fires and left it in place while we were getting record-breaking rains where I live here in Bedford, Nova Scotia. The main road here in Bedford was under 10 feet of water. We had massive floods, and he kept that fire ban in place for days after while those massive floods were going on, and then still kept them in the fire areas after the fires they hadn't been declared out, but there was no smoke left, and there was no reason at all to keep the ban in place. And that ban was a charter violation as well, Shadoe, but nobody challenged them. And nobody wants to get involved in charter challenges, because I'm in the middle of one now. It's because they're costly and they eat up a ton of time and they take a lot of time. But Tim Houston learned his lesson with that one, that if I can scare enough people, they'll do exactly what they're told. And with $28,000 fines hinging on it, how many people do you think are going to stick their neck out? Well, enough people are getting fed up that they're starting to make videos and go, this is absolute nonsense, right? And because they can't define a lot of things, and because this doesn't apply to our Indigenous folks here in Nova Scotia, and it doesn't apply to golfers and a bunch of other people, I think he's just about at the breaking limit. And we've had 2 small fires already this month, like I said, that didn't get out of hand. But I think it's at the breaking point. And the thing is I listened to another talk show today in Ontario, and Snow is the guy's name. Do you know the guy that I'm talking about? And I listened to all the comments up in Ontario too, right? And people from Nova Scotia, we support the Premier. And here's another thing I know about the Premier. The Premier's not above getting a lot of the people, his supporters, to call in on talk shows to say he's doing a wonderful job.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they get him on commenting on social media also. Yeah, it's a bot farm or whatever. Maybe it's some
farm, or he has no problem with seeding the audience. The man seeding an audience, the man's absolutely ruthless. But every time someone calls in and goes, you've never been around a house that's there's a chance of it burning down. Well, here's the chance that's coming right now in the fire forecast. We have potential for a thunderstorm with very little rain, but with thunder comes lightning. And in some of these areas now, because we don't have people in the woods with cell phones and fire towers, you could get a log hit with lightning, and no one's going to know until that fire gets to the point where the problem's just not going to be able to handle it because of bad management, poor decisions, and budget cuts over the last 10 years. And I personally advised Tim Houston that this was going to be a problem, and he personally decided to ignore it.
Peter, I'm not sure you watched the Jeff Eively video, the one where he actually goes into the woods. He takes he's going to be on the show tomorrow night, by the way. Jeff is, and
I'm on another show with him tomorrow morning.
Oh yeah, you guys have been busy these last few days, and for good reason. The conservation officers, there were 3 of them, and he was very polite when he went into that office, and they were polite as well. But one of them said, "I'm going to double your fine," and I couldn't understand why. And what I also couldn't understand was that these guys, and again, this goes right back to our COVID days. These guys were willing to go ahead and enforce that ridiculous ban that the Premier put into place because they're just doing their job. I'm wondering if there's any conservation officers anywhere that would defy something ridiculous like that. I mean, why doesn't the Premier just say, hey, on Tuesdays, everybody has to skip to work on 1 foot. You can't take your car. You just got to skip to work on 1 foot. And if you don't, you're going to get a $25,000 fine.
And so that's the height of ridiculousness that Nova Scotia has descended into. Because what you're saying, Shadoe, is if he gets away with this one, he can get away with anything. And he knows it. He's not stupid. The man, one thing you got to give Tim Houston, he's ruthless and he's not stupid, and he's very, very well connected. And so I worked with a lot of guys over the years. All conservation officers are granted discretion. Nobody has to do anything. You don't have to write anybody a ticket. You control the pen. And you could say, look, I'll give you a warning on this one. My understanding, though, from my time in both politics here in the province, because I ran for government after I got out. I was naive enough to think I could make a difference. And then here's the way things work so that people know. The premier decides here's what he wants to do for political reasons. Then he calls his deputy minister and says, make it happen. Or first of all, he calls his minister. And if the minister's got any backbone, he says, Tim, no, we're not doing that. This is crazy. But in Nova Scotia, if the minister says that, he's going under the bus. So he says, yes, sir, right? With the hand up, the old East Germany type of thing. Anyways, and then he tells his deputy minister. And the deputy minister calls his senior director. And the senior director calls the manager and says, make it happen. And if the manager doesn't make it happen, then what happens is he gets replaced. Just quietly, look, if you won't do what we're telling you to do, we'll find someone who will. So now the province is packed with yes men. And I saw a good man stand there on Friday and give a warning on the government website. And I went right on underneath him and said, Scott, just tell the truth. Say no. Tell people what the real reason is. Tell them based on the numbers that there's no justification for a province-wide travel ban. Just be honest with people. But if he's honest, if he tells the truth, Shadoe, he probably got a wife and kids he got to feed. And in this province, because the premier is a Mason, he's not going to be working anymore. He'll be gone and he won't be able to be hired anywhere. And that's the way this province works.
Yeah, not only is he fired, but he's got a black mark on his record for the rest of his life. So
Pretty
he's
much.
not going to.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so even with me, like even when I had 4 kids, I saw all kinds of crazy stuff happen, but never to this level. But you would see things and corruption and stuff, and they couldn't wait. I mean, the day I left, I went, okay, I'm going to go in and upset the apple cart.
Have you seen this story? It just came out today or yesterday. There's just too many fires. Calls grow for National Wildfire Agency.
Yeah,
so,
and who's that coming from? Who's
well,
that story from? Who was it?
That was left-wing corporate CTV.
Yeah, so those guys, people have to realize that down here in Atlantic Canada, CTV, ATV Atlantic, they were almost bankrupt last December. They were crying for money. And all of a sudden they swung hard left, supporting everything from in the Carney campaign. They didn't declare bankruptcy. They got the money somewhere. So basically everyone's bought off in mainstream media. So we have to go to people like you to rely on getting the truth. And that I'll be doing this stuff for I'm booked for the next 5 days, because nobody down here will stick their neck out and say what I'm saying. Well, what are they going to do to me? Nothing. I got a special skill set. Leave me alone.
But amazingly, if everybody did step up and say something, and I guess this is like the Jerry Maguire effect, right? Who's coming with me?
Yeah.
Nobody. Crickets.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could get everybody together and just say, you know what, this is ridiculous. You guys know it's ridiculous. They know it's ridiculous. They're play acting. Just tell them no. You know, like Jeff Eively goes into the woods all by himself. He gets a $28,875 ticket. But if you put 500 people or 5,000 people into the bush in Nova Scotia, what would they do about that, Peter?
Well, I think the secret is to have a Palestinian protest. Right?
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day. I put it up. It was hiking for Palestine.
And so what would happen is then the Mounties would usher you in and they'd bring you coffee later, right? So
right.
But if that happened, and here's the other issue, Shadoe, is I would say that the COs were probably told, the conservation officers in Nova Scotia, zero leniency, none. If we have proof that you cut anybody any leniency, you won't be doing this job anymore, because that's the way it works. And people like to think that people, and to be honest with you, anytime management tells a CO what they have to do, that's a criminal code offense. They're not allowed to do that.
They're not allowed to screw her. Like they cannot direct police forces, right?
They legally can't, but they often do. The PMO still directs the RCMP. That's why the RCMP won't charge. When was the last time you saw a Liberal MP charged with anything? This is not going to happen. The PMO controls the RCMP. And down here, the Premier's office controls the COs, and they do exactly what they're told.
Do you know what shows you're going to be on, Peter? We've got to wrap up. So
I'm going to be on in the morning. I'm on with, I think, Levine at West there. I'm trying to remember
Jason? Okay.
Jason Levine. Yeah, Jeff and I are on with Jason Levine tomorrow morning, but it'll be short. And all I'd ask is that if anybody wants to stay up to date what's going on here, follow me at Peter R. MacIsaac on X. And I'm heavily shadow banned. And I guess, is that where you got the name Shadoe? Or is that a nickname or your real name, Shadoe?
That's part of it, but it goes back way years ago. So it's not just recent shadow banning, but
so why don't you put band in there? Shadow
band Davis.
Anyway, look, thanks for having me on. And now, so what that is a lot of the backstory that you won't get from anywhere else. And all the Premier has to do is cancel one of the orders on those 3 helicopters, bring back in Helitac, and make some serious changes and go, you know what? I had some real issues in regards to the fires. I was on a talk show Sunday where I said, look, he's exhibiting signs of PTSD. Maybe he needs to go check into the mental health division for Nova Scotia Healthcare and find out how that's going to work for him. And then I challenged him to be on talk radio. The host said, okay, can you get him to come in? And I said, I've been fishing with the guy. He's a moral coward. He's not going to come in and debate me on this issue because I'll tear him apart.
I wonder if there's any mechanism within Nova Scotia or Canadian law, for that matter, to remove an elected official who's suffering from a mental breakdown.
So, like I said, I'm not a doctor, but when you bring in all your MLAs and say, this has really got me messed up. I mean, I can't sleep. I'm worrying about, 2023 happening again. Well, 2023 happened legally, and there's nothing that he put in place right now that could stop it. And the only thing he could do to fix it was bring back Helitac, get a better helicopter when he had an opportunity to do it, increase the fire crew sizes, and then let the professionals take the fire weather index and let the system we have in place that works do its job and keep the politics out of it.
Peter, thank you. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Shadoe.
All right, brother.
Yep.
There's Peter MacIsaac, you guys. Peter MacIsaac, former firefighter, veteran firefighter from Nova Scotia. I've got more for you. I'll be right back in 30 seconds. Peter is always a great guest. Tomorrow night, Jeff Eively, the man who walked 13 paces into the woods in Nova Scotia, received a $28,875 ticket, joins the show, and here's how he got that ticket.
Hey everybody, Jeff Eively here, out in Nova Scotia on Mountain Road in Coxheath. And as you can see behind me, this is the woods. But over here, this is not the woods. This is the Department of Natural Resources, where the conservation officers work, who issue $25,000 fines for going in the woods.
You have to go in the woods.
Yes.
Steps.
Sure. You want to show me where the woods is, out back here? Or
still,
wherever you want.
We still have to suggest that you don't.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just ordered me. He said he's going to double my fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to defy that order. Nothing. So, one more time. This is the DNR office on Mountain Road in Coxheath, Nova Scotia. And this is not the woods. But back here, this is the woods. So, I have a couple of conservation officers with me right now who are not on camera but have advised me that if I go into the woods, if I defy their orders to go into the woods, then I will be fined, and they also said that they would double my fine to $50,000. So I'm going to walk down here and go into these woods. I don't know that there's a good spot to do this, but I'm just going to make this as painless as I can for those guys and go in here. And they have me on camera as well, walking in the woods. This is not the woods. Hi. I was just out back with the three gentlemen there. They said they would meet me back in here.
Entering the woods.
Yeah.
Without forest travel permit when proclamation is effect. You have a court plea date. Your due date is the 12th of September. So it's a lot quicker, just the ticket. So.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So this is.
Want to go that to make it quicker.
Okay. So this is an SOT, and that is for summons to accused. What is this?
Summary offense ticket.
Yeah.
For today's date. Your information, Forest Act 25 sub 1. Fine is $28,872.50.
Okay. I thought it was 25,000. It's 28,870.
Court costs, victim fees.
Taxes.
Oh, victim fees.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Here we go. Oh, I have a ticket here for. Let me see if you can see that. $28,870.50 for victimizing somebody. Okay, so more to follow.
Yeah, so Jeff is going to be on the show tomorrow night. We're going to talk more about this and how he's going to pursue this. What's to follow? Well, apparently, according to Peter McKisac, he's got a team of lawyers who are on board. And we do know that John Carpe of the JCCF, who was on the show last week, said, something we definitely consider following up on if somebody's got the balls to go into the woods, that is. Our friend Greg Wycliffe, because I asked this question earlier tonight, are conservatives anymore? I don't know. They seem to make a point, and sometimes it's a good one, and then they waffle back. They have no backbone. They have nothing to back it up with. Actually, they do have plenty to back it up with, but they choose to not. Why do they keep backing off? Are they cowards, or are they being told to back off? The high-profile ones, not the backbenchers. The high-profile ones are the ones they worry about the most. So here's Greg talking about that very thing.
Conservatives in Canada doing okay right now. The Premier of Nova Scotia is a progressive conservative, and he just said, don't go in the woods or else we're going to fine you $25,000. This is the conservative acting like some sort of eco-fascist. The conservative, the progressive conservative is doing this. By the way, haven't heard anyone from the Polyev camp or the CPC camp condemning this outrageous policy, by the way. Conservative Party, federal Conservative Party. And then you have Danielle Smith in Alberta, the most conservative province, the most conservative premier. Do you know who she just nominated or chose to be the provincial police chief? The first provincial police force is run by this guy named Sat Singh Parhar. Sat Singh Parhar is your police chief of Alberta. Albertans, hey Alberta separatists, Alberta prosperity. Sat Singh Parhar is your police chief, and he has a really interesting background. Mocha Bezirgan has been exposing this guy, this new police chief, and like no one else is covering this for some reason. It's outrageous stuff. And there's a lot of things that do not smell good about this Singh Parhar guy, and I'll just go over this email that Mocha sent to Premier Smith and the questions that he asked Premier Smith. Dear Premier Smith, what specific criteria or vetting process was used to select Satpal Singh Parhar for this? Were the serious allegations and unresolved lawsuits involving Mr. Parhar during his time at Calgary Police Service disclosed to your office prior to the appointment? Did your office or any relevant provincial authority conduct a background check into Mr. Parhar's business interests, including Retrain Canada and Solve Cyber Solutions? If so, were those investigators aware of the Huawei listing on Retrain Nigeria's website and Parhar's continuing shareholder role through a numbered company? Do you view it as concerning that someone with the background in intelligence and organized crime investigations is a current shareholder in a company that has Huawei as a client, a firm treated as a threat to national security both by Canada and the US? Those are really good questions from Mocha Bezirgan. I highly recommend you go check out his content if you want to learn more about your new police chief, Alberta. And my question is simple. Why aren't more people talking about this? Like, where's the motion? Where's the sort of outrage with conservatives? Like, this is a national security threat. Retrain Nigeria is actually connected to a World Economic Forum initiative as well. They're called Manpower Group. WEF. And Manpower is the partner of Retrain Canada and Retrain Nigeria. By the way, Satpal Singh Parhar used to be here listed as a chairman, but ever since Mocha has published his findings, oh, what do you know? Satparhar Singh is no longer on the board for Retrain Nigeria. Albertans, Conservatives, you got to start asking questions.
All right. Well, Greg brings up some very good points there. I found out some stuff today. I'm not able to give you everything yet. I will be able to on Wednesday night when Grant Abraham joins the show. Grant is the leader of the United Party of Canada, so he is a federalist party. We're going to talk about Alberta sovereignty on Wednesday night and all kinds of other things. Grant currently is running for that vacant seat in the by-election next Monday in Battle River Crowfoot against Pierre Poilievre. We had a great discussion on the phone today, Grant and I did, and he talked extensively about Pierre Poilievre and specifically about why he didn't get his security clearance. And it may not be what we all think it was. So you guys, Wednesday night, very compelling show. We're going to just open some curtains for you on Wednesday night. We're going to go hard on this one. Grant Abraham joins the show. And are there any real conservatives left? I mean, just because they call themselves conservative doesn't mean they're conservative, right? I don't think Manitoba's got a conservative party left. Progressive conservative? I don't think so. The conservative part anyway. Ontario, Doug Ford, I think he's a liberal. I think they want him to be the next leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. What about Danielle Smith? We're going to find out more on Wednesday night. What about BC? Nova Scotia? Liz Truss, I believe, is a real conservative. Now, Liz is British, former, for a cup of coffee, former Prime Minister of the UK. And she is now speaking out about the cabal. She was on with Ben Shapiro today.
We have a very powerful orthodoxy that's not just in Britain, it's also there in the Congressional Budget Office that refused to score Trump's tax cuts. It's there in the IMF who provide the commentary. It's there in Davos. So we are fighting against a massive leftist machine. And all of these issues are connected because they believe migration is a good thing for the economy. So they won't let politicians cut migration. They believe that net zero is good for the economy. Do you remember when Mark Carney was saying that we're going to get all...
They won't. Did you hear what she just said? They won't let politicians cut migration. She didn't even say immigration, did she? She said migration.
Cut migration. They believe that net zero is good for the economy. Do you remember when Mark Carney was saying that we're going to get all these green jobs and net zero is going to power the economy? No, it's not. The British economy is on its knees. But what has Mark Carney been rewarded with? The Prime Ministership of Canada. So you have all these people circulating, sharing bad ideas, undermining the West, and yet there's just a circuit of those people getting promoted into ever higher positions.
So I find it very fascinating that somebody like Liz Truss is speaking up. And I'm wondering if she's concerned for her safety. I'm wondering if it gets to that point. Does it get to the point where these people become threatened by whomever? And linking the death of somebody like that to the cabal, the oligarchy, or whatever you want to call it, would be very difficult, wouldn't it? I'm going to bring something else up very briefly before we get to the BC Aboriginal story, and that is this. This is Macleans magazine. This is owned by Rogers, just so you guys are aware. This is a paid-for publication. You are not allowed, generally speaking, to get past this paywall on Macleans unless there's a story they really want you to see. And I believe that the Nudge, Canada's Nudge Agency, is behind this. And it's not just Maclean's, it's not just Rogers, it's all news publications, left-wing corporate media in Canada. Globe and Mail is a great example. Normally, their stories are behind a paywall. Sometimes, occasionally, they'll let some puff piece leak. but they never, ever, ever let you pass their paywall for important stories. You've got to get a subscription. Unless they want you to see it. And again, that's Canada's nudge team. Impact Canada, which is part of the Privy Council office, which is the Prime Minister's ministry. So this story gets out. Canada needs a national vaccination registry. And they go on and on and on about all the dangerous diseases that can be prevented or wiped out by vaccines, including measles. Measles. It's the first one they talk about by Dr. Don Bodish. This is a free story available for anybody on Macleans. Why? I'm not going to go into great detail about this. Now, as far as this landmark court ruling, our friend Bella Marcella said in the comments, and she just texted me, and I want to mention this before we even begin covering this tonight, that apparently the government of BC is going to be appealing this ruling. Sounds odd. It seems like that's what the NDP wanted. They've been going along with this UNDRIP thing for years, and now they're going to appeal this? Maybe it's just faux show. Don't know. But thank you, Marcella, Bella Marcella. You know her as in the comments. So here's the story, and a lot of people were getting in touch with me today saying, oh, there's a story. It's not what you think it is because Northern Perspective said so. Look, those guys do some good work. I'm not going to say they don't, but I believe their reporting in this situation, while factual, was guided in the wrong direction, and they weren't looking at outside sources. They weren't looking at the pattern that's been going on all across the world with this stuff. And so they say, well, it doesn't affect your home ownership. Okay, maybe not for now. It doesn't. But don't think for 1 second, because the First Nations who won this court case last week and are looking at it as a tremendous victory, don't think for 1 second they're not going to rethink that original position and go after your home, go after your property, because now they know they can win, especially in this highly charged and politicized climate that we're in. Landmark court ruling awards First Nation title over big area of federal and private land in Metro Vancouver. So here's a picture. Now, not all of this was awarded to the Cowichan. Just along here, the shoreline, you can see where my pointer is right there. The rest of it is still municipal, federal, provincial for now. The Cowichan First Nation and several allied First Nations have won a major legal battle, confirming they hold legal rights to a part of their historic lands in Richmond, as well as the right to fish in a section of the Fraser River for food. The Supreme Court of British Columbia's landmark ruling last Thursday could be highly consequential and precedent-setting, challenging long-held assumptions at the core of Canadian society about the fundamental legality of private property by placing Aboriginal title above fee simple ownership. That's the system we have in Canada, meaning I buy a property from you, it passes by title to me. Fee simple, that's what it's called. This is a standard form of private property ownership all across the country. Early critics warn of potential ripple effects with highly detrimental consequences for BC's economy, investment climate, and confidence, real estate market, law, and overall political and social stability. Yeah. They're not going to take their land or your land from you because they said that they didn't want it. That's the First Nations bands that launched this case in the first place. They said they didn't want your lands, but now that they've been emboldened, I would expect they will move forward and actually try to claim some property just to show that they can. That's my prediction. It might not be right, but that's what I believe is going to happen. And it's not going to be fast either. This is the longest trial in Canadian history, the longest court case. This claim by the Cowichan was firmly opposed. And look at, and you know, Northern Perspective trying to play this down. Not such a big deal. Look at who was opposing this. The government of Canada, the government of BC, Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, City of Richmond, as well as the Musqueam Indian Band and the Tawasin First Nation. All 6 of these entities were also the defendants in the case. Not a big deal? Yeah, I don't think so. The area in question is called the Lands of Tuquitinis by the Cowichan, located in southeast Richmond within an area that sees largely industrial uses. I can say Cutinis, but I can't say industrial. What? That sees largely industrial uses on the Fraser River shoreline. From the outset of the trial, the Cowichan's requested claims spanned about 1,846 acres of land, nearly twice the size of Vancouver Stanley Park, as well as other certain lands held by the federal government or municipal government. It's home to federal port and energy facilities, major industrial businesses such as a logistics and warehouse facility for Amazon, Canadian Tire, Wayfair, UPS. There are also some residential and farmland, agriculture properties on the periphery. So this is the Lands of Tuquitinis claim area here. We've been looking at the photos of it. There. The question is not whether Aboriginal title can exist over fee simple lands, but whether fee simple interests can exist on Aboriginal title lands. Seriously. So you're going to talk about Canada being completely any property that was purchased and changed hands over the past 150 years, you're saying might be invalid. Whoa. That is the level of insanity that this so-called country is at right now. In the written ruling, the judge acknowledged that in making this decision, the bulk of the evidence in this case spans centuries, particularly the period 1790 to 1914. In the early part of this period, written records were sparse and incomplete, but the judge determined there was still a substantial body of evidence before me, including oral history, historical written records, which might or might not be true, expert opinion, again, opinion, and ethnographic evidence. Ethnographic? Let me look that one up. Ethnographic. Qualitative method focused on understanding cultures and social behaviors through an in-depth study of people and their natural environments. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China in this story? And besides, even with ethnographic evidence, it can still be wrong, or some of it might be omitted. The judge ruled that Cowichan Aboriginal title is more fundamental than fee simple ownership, asserting that Aboriginal title is protected by the Canadian Constitution and comes first in the legal hierarchy. However, the Cowichan did not ask the court to overturn or invalidate existing private property titles. That means private landowners still legally own their land for now, unless a court decides otherwise in the future, or unless the issue is settled through negotiation, purchase, or some other agreement. Let me ask you this, because this is setting a bad precedent. And you can bet your bottom dollar that other Indian bands across the country are now going to launch cases based on the results of this. And they'll win. Who are you paying your property taxes to? Who's it going to? Will they even let you stay? I mean, in this case, yeah, they say sure. But in future cases, are they going to let you stay in your home, on your property? Remember, what the judge ruled, as we go back up here, is that Aboriginal title is more fundamental than fee simple ownership. This asserts, again, this writer correctly points out, that Aboriginal title is protected by the Canadian Constitution and comes first in the legal hierarchy. All right, so our friend Marcella says that the BC government is going to appeal this decision. Kevin Klein is the publisher of the Winnipeg Sun, and he wrote a piece on this today. Because again, there are people saying, oops, I guess I can't read that. I was able to before. Anyway, what he says is that don't think you're not affected by this. You are affected by this, whether you understand it or not. If they take over lands, they take over all of the stuff that's been built on those lands, all the infrastructure, roads, highways, lights, everything. That's all theirs now. Anything that's on the land is theirs. You will be affected by this because they can do, the First Nations, anything they want on these lands without answering to anybody. We're going to do more on this regarding UNDRIP in the extension tonight for you all access Nighthawks on shadowdavis.com. Couple more things for you guys before we wrap up tonight. Stop with the nonsense. Calgarians line up to oppose Alberta separation. Okay, so here's a picture in the front of the Calgary Herald. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 of them maybe. I don't know. There's a better picture a little bit further down the story. Calgarians opposed to Alberta separating from Canada lined up along a Kensington block yesterday to sign a petition as part of the Alberta Forever Canada Citizen Initiative. The campaign, spearheaded by former Progressive Conservative Deputy Premier Thomas McKisac, aims to collect nearly 300,000 signatures by October 28th to force a referendum asking whether Alberta should remain in Canada. Interesting. It launched in Edmonton August 2nd under older legislation that gives campaigns 90 days to collect signatures from 20% of the province's electorate. McKisac said last week about 2,000 registered signature collectors have been processed, with a good chunk from Calgary. He pointed to people starting micro campaigns all over the province, with volunteers attending events and door knocking through the city over the next 3 months. On Sunday, one of the first major Calgary efforts saw volunteers stationed near Kensington Plaza. Volunteer Faraz Anwar stood at the front of the line, which quickly grew to more than 24 people. Oh my God. Seems like we're off to a good start. We might actually get there, he said. I'm being hopeful. It seems like most of these people are being hopeful. Standing in line, Calgary resident Tara Ernst said she made her way down after hearing about the initiative on social media. I want to send a clear message to Danielle Smith that I'm not in favor of us separating from Canada. Hopefully she hears it loud and clear. People are upset and angry, and they want to voice their concern and their opinion. There's the people. There they all are. Look at them all. It's amazing. It fills my heart with such joy to see so many people come out in support of staying in this country. This is what they're proud of? Are you kidding me right now? Some of these people might not even be there standing in line. They might just have bumped into a neighbor. Like this guy here is wondering, what the hell's going on? What are all these people doing here? I don't know, man. This is going to be a good fight. And we're going to find out more about Danielle Smith on Wednesday night with Grant Abraham of the United Party of Canada. This is the last story we have for you guys tonight in the social media part of the show. Leger poll done the last few days dealing with federal government satisfaction. And before we get to this, I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen this, but if you have, please don't answer the question. In comments, I want to know, what percentage of Canadians are satisfied with the Mark Carney government so far? Write it down in comments, please. I want to see this. Even you guys on Rumble, please write it down. I didn't say hello to you Rumble guys tonight. Appreciate you being here. Stalwarts of freedom. I love you. So, anybody writing it down? Anybody? Come on, you guys. What percentage of Canadians are satisfied with the Carney government? Okay, so Lise says 59%. Jack says 30%. Terry says 48%. Marty says 0. Stacy says, I think it was 61. I asked you if you saw this, then please don't write it down. You're not. Vicky says 48. Joy says 10%. Monica says less than 50. Bumpy Johnson, 70%. All right, let's go down here. Bumpy. From July 4th to July 6th, we surveyed Canadians on their federal voting intentions, their views on government performance, key national issues, discover all the insights, blah, 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 blah. If an election were held today, nearly 1 in 2 Canadians, 48%, would vote for Mark Carney's Liberal Party, placing it well ahead of the Conservatives. Now, that's not the satisfaction number. But even that in and of itself is depressing. But again, I believe many of these polls, just like the polls that were released during the election campaign, came from Impact Canada. They weren't real. We got snookered. That's my belief. I can't prove that. But there is absolutely no way that the entire dynamics of a country shift that quickly. Doesn't happen. Anyway. Majority of Canadians, 55%, say 55. Who had 55? Say they're satisfied with the Carney government, including 13% who were very, very satisfied. Only 13%. So that says a lot. Satisfaction is highest, obviously, among Liberal voters at 91%, among those aged 55 plus at 63%. I wonder if kids, and I'm not talking about children, I'm talking about grown kids of these boomers, the elbows up, the ones that voted for Carney, have said to their mothers and fathers, how could you vote for these people again? I wonder if a lot of those conversations have been had across the country. But then again, I don't think that many people did. But again, that's only my opinion. Approval of Mark Carney's performance as Prime Minister is similar. 58% approve. He's got 103 conflicts of interest. That's fine. That's fine. We're going to recognize the state of Palestine. Oh, cool. That's great. Hasn't got to deal with Trump when everybody else does. Oh, yeah. Isn't that what he was elected for? Isn't that why you voted for him? Yeah, sure. Don't worry about it. It's coming. It's coming. It's amazing to me. Once again, approval is higher among Liberal voters, 93%, and those aged 55 plus. It's difficult. We're not going to get into the rest of it. It's difficult admitting that you're wrong. I know. And so these people, even to an anonymous pollster, will not admit that they were wrong. But then you have to ask, would Poilievre have done any better? Is it all part of the same thing? Are we going to be able to collapse this monster before it's too late? I don't know. All right, that's it for the show tonight, guys. Don't forget Jeff Eively tomorrow night, Grant Abraham on Wednesday night. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I will catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock for another episode. Don't forget, become a member at ShadoeDavis.com. You get the extra content, and coming this weekend, we are going to be opening the Shadoe store where you can go ahead. And I'm going to throw in some winter stuff because winter is coming. So we're going to create some toques and some warm fleece hoodies for you guys with all kinds of expressions that I use on the show emblazoned on these articles of clothing. There's t-shirts and sweatshirts and all that stuff as well. And you will have special access to the Shadoe store if you're a member at ShadoeDavis.com, and you'll get a certain percentage off whatever article you choose. Or maybe we'll do some buy one, get one free things. I'm not really a retailer. So I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we're going to do something to your benefit. How's that? So yeah, the extension begins in just a couple of minutes. To become a member, just go sign up at ShadoeDavis.com. Tonight, we're going to talk about UNDRIP and what else? Oh, yeah, the rise and fall of Tim Hortons. I will see you there on the website in 2 minutes.